Hey there, folks. Welcome to the SME Strategy Podcast. My name is Anthony Taylor. Today, I'm joined by Jonathan Ferrari, who is the founder, CEO, and chairman at Goodfood. For our friends around the world, if you've ever heard of Fresh Prep or Chef's Kitchen or any of those meal kit services, Goodfood is not a Canadian equivalent. I want to say that it's better. Having used it myself, I think it's a great service. The business itself is expanding both strategically, vertically, horizontally, and is doing a lot of cool things in a lot of cool spaces. So, Jonathan, I'm really excited to chat with you to learn more about your history as well as your future.
Yeah, nice to see you, Anthony, and it's great to be on the podcast.
Awesome. So how does somebody who has a background in banking create an awesome, country Canadian food brand? How did you get this idea?
Yeah, so it's hard to believe we're celebrating Goodfood's 10-year anniversary this year. And I started Goodfood with two business partners back in 2014. And at the time, there was no Uber Eats, there was no real restaurant or grocery delivery option that existed. And I was in the finance space working in investment banking. And so I started thinking about ways to improve how we were getting food delivered to the office. We were busy, young professionals. And one thing that I always thought about was I didn't mind the idea of cooking, but I just wanted an easier way to meal plan, to do the cooking. So part of it was solving a personal need. The other part was Goodfood combines a bunch of different passions that I've had for my entire life. I learned to cook from my grandmother. So I was in the kitchen at an early age, learning about chopping vegetables, combining flavors, traditional recipes. The food ecosystem was something that always was interesting to me as well. So learning about the food supply chain, where our food comes from, how to grow it, the importance of sourcing locally and healthy food, that's been part of my life for as long as I can remember. And then the last piece, I think, is for everyone that has an entrepreneurial tilt, the idea of creating something that wouldn't exist without me, that I could really have a major impact on. It was something that I wasn't feeling when I was working in a very big financial organization. I was at the Royal Bank of Canada. It was an incredible learning opportunity, networking opportunity, but it's hard to make a real impact, like a lasting impact beyond my time there in an organization that has 100,000 people. So I love the idea of being able to build something that might not exist without us and bring people together, other co-founders, early employees, to create something great that I hoped one day could turn into a national household brand.
Awesome. And how big is Goodfood now, just for reference for our listeners?
So we deliver about 15 million meals per year right now. We have close to 1,000 employees across the country, and we partner with, I'll say somewhere between 50 and 60 local Canadian suppliers, farms, family businesses that we've grown with over time. And I think we've made a positive impact in the food ecosystem in Canada.
Awesome. And I love the word like positive impact. It's just so interesting, for me as a person who loves food, for those of you that have seen me in person, I'm not a small guy. But, looking at food security, generally food supply chains, the quality and accessibility of it, and then where it's going to be in 5-10 years, the importance of having, the ability to grow food. So I'm curious to see how you see the future of food. So let's talk about the journey. At the time, no Uber Eats. You've now grown the business to, 1,000 employees and, of course, the 15 million meals a year. What were some of the biggest challenges that you faced in what seemed to be overnight an incredibly competitive space? It was hard to differentiate. One of the questions that we had as a family is, I like this service because they use less plastic. Those were the nuanced decisions. How did your team have those conversations about building that sustainable competitive advantage? And how did you think about it as a strategist?
Mm-hmm. So at the core of it, I think building a service and a platform that I myself and my partners wanted to be customers of, I think that was always something that was important. And we wanted to build something that we would be proud to serve our families, because that's what we do every single day, every single week, 10 years in now. Um, Thinking back to a few of the early challenges, you mentioned one of them on the packaging side. So e-commerce had been done before, right? Amazon existed. You could order packages to be delivered to your home. But what didn't exist before was how do you order temperature controlled packages, right? Things that are perishable products that you'd want to have delivered to your home. And so we had to really work very closely with our suppliers to innovate temperature controlled food packaging. And mostly what was being used in the US for food delivery at the time was the same kind of like packaging that pharmaceutical companies would use to deliver vaccines or temperature controlled pharmaceuticals. And those will keep the temperature in transit, but they're horrible for the environment. And so they're typically styrofoam based, one-time use landfill products. And we work very closely with our suppliers to develop first recyclable packaging, and now a good portion of our packaging is actually compostable as well. I think on the logistics side, that was another key challenge. So thinking about how to build a direct-to-consumer logistics network that could service Canadians across the country. Canada is a massive land area, as you know, and we've built out a direct-to-consumer logistics fleet that can service 95% of the Canadian population today. There's some very northern parts of Canada and some rural areas that we can't reach. But that was a real challenge. And one of the early stories that I like to think back on is I remember our very first week of deliveries. We were actually building the meal kits in my apartment in downtown Montreal. And we were getting all set up to have Canada Post come and pick up the deliveries from our warehouse. And at the end of the day, all the deliveries were ready, all the boxes were packed, and we thought Canada Post was going to show up at 4:00. We thought they were running late, they'd show up at 5:00. 6:00 rolls around, Canada Post is nowhere to be seen. And so we realized quickly we need to pivot and complete the deliveries ourselves in, my business partner's wife's little Fiat 500. And so, it kind of shows how in the early days, you need to be ready to roll with the punches. You need to pivot and roll with what's happening. But it showed us that we wanted to have control over our delivery network. And so we built out over the next 10 years a network of independent contractors that actually just do deliveries for Goodfood for about 60% of our network. And then we have trusted partners outside of that that do the other 40% of our network. But when you're in the perishable delivery game, you want to make sure the food is fresh. So our supply chain is all about working with our suppliers to get the fresh produce, fresh ingredients as quickly as possible from the time that they're harvested to our fulfillment centers and then to our customers' homes. So we put a lot of effort and time in thinking about how to build that out.
Yeah, like the supply chain impacts of it are significant because there's you could get any food, and everything that I've known about good food is it's quality food. For those of you listeners that have ever been to Montreal, there's good food in Montreal. It is like it's European roots. And so you appreciate, good food, dare I say. And so it's neat to see it out of there, whereas potentially another Canadian province, no disrespect to any other Canadian province, but might not have the same appreciation for the quality of food, part of the supply chain, and then, what it takes to make a good meal versus something perhaps that might be more starch heavy. And again, as a person who eats, I love my carbs, but it isn't necessarily aligning with that mission. So let's talk about the mission. One of the organizations that you were part of early stages, and I'm sure you've evolved your kind of charitable side, was Fourchette d'Espoir. Tell me about the social impact that you guys have had over the 10 years and then, what you're looking forward to doing in the future.
Yeah, so Les Fourchettes de l'Espoir was actually my first foray into nonprofits and supporting food insecurity. And it was focused on helping kids in schools have access to lunches, basically to better nutrition. And we know that at the core, when kids have access to better nutrition, They're learning more. They're not exhibiting as many signs of, attention deficit, and they're able to really absorb the content at school because their stomachs are full. So I was on the board there for about a year, and then I was thinking about how to grow our impact, and we ended up partnering with the Breakfast Club of Canada, that is a national organization. So Les Fourchettes de l'Espoir is really a local Montreal organization, but the Breakfast Club of Canada works with schools across the country, and we've been supporting them over the past 10 years. We've donated over 1 million meals to the Breakfast Club of Canada. And one of my favorite parts of the partnership actually is we have Goodfood employees that go into some of the schools that the Breakfast Club supports, and we go and serve breakfast to the kids. We connect with them, and having that connection beyond just donations or beyond giving food, but really interacting with the kids, it makes you feel the impact even more.
That's awesome. I mean, it's not every business that can do that. For example, if you're a bank or if you are, in manufacturing, the linkage between what you do and like the human culture being, but with food and food security or insecurity, it's such a palpable one. You either have food or you don't. And just today, I saw some announcement that they've made some cool across Canada initiative to address food insecurity. I think, again, it's going to be a huge problem. And then one of the things that I understand about your company is, you're looking to see how can you support organizations across Canada that want to grow and scale their businesses in the food space. I want to ask you about that a little bit later. One of the things that you did strategically is you guys as an organization, correct me if I'm wrong, created a Bitcoin reserve. Is that true?
We did.
So I don't know anything about Bitcoin. I am not pro or con Bitcoin, and there's lots to learn. But I'm curious about how you as an organization looked at, all of the opportunities and said, hey, this is one of the things that tactically, strategically, we're going to do. My understanding is you are an early adopter of Bitcoin, so you probably understand it better than the average bear. But why did you as a company do that versus, doing it personally as a CEO?
For sure. So great question. And we announced earlier this year, it was actually in January 2025 that we announced publicly that we were creating a Bitcoin strategic reserve at Goodfood. And what that means basically is we're taking part of the cash that we have on Goodfood's balance sheet and converting it into Bitcoin. And so rightfully so, the question is, why would we ever want to do that? And so I've been an early adopter of Bitcoin personally, as you mentioned. I've been involved in the space since 2015. And the way I was introduced to it was I had a friend that was looking to raise some capital to create a Bitcoin mining rig, essentially buying servers to mine Bitcoin. And he approached me, started talking to me about it. And I said, what the heck is this Bitcoin thing? Why are you mining it? What's going on? And it piqued my curiosity, right, to learn more about it. And it was a relatively small investment at the time. And so I said, I trust you. I'll take a flyer. Let's invest in this Bitcoin mining rig. But for me, it was really more of a learning opportunity, right, to put a little bit of skin in the game. Like, you buy a share of a stock, you start following it, you get interested in the stock market, you get interested in the company, and it gives you a reason to want to learn more about it. So that's exactly what happened. We started mining Bitcoin. We took the decision to hold the Bitcoin that we were mining. A lot of the Bitcoin miners go out and sell the Bitcoin as soon as they mine it. And over the next few years, we accumulated some Bitcoin. And then in 2017, there was a pretty big, Bitcoin winter is what it's called, when there's a sizable crash in the market that lasts for an extended period of time. And during that Bitcoin winter, I did even more research, right? It was really understanding what is Bitcoin, why does it exist, why is it important? And as I did more and more research, I got excited about it in a way that, the last time I had gotten that excited was when I started discovering the power of the internet as a kid, to go out and create businesses and use the internet as a platform that ultimately could change the world as we knew it. And so, in the same way, my first introduction to the internet from a business perspective was I guess I was a teenager in high school. I would go out and go from garage sale to garage sale. I would find collectible toys and then resell them on eBay because someone's trash ended up becoming someone else's gold online. And that would have never been possible without the power of the internet. And since then, we've seen all sorts of amazing businesses, right, be built on the internet. There's Goodfood, there's Uber, Amazon, the list goes on and on.
Yeah.
And so, I think where we're at with the Bitcoin economy, we're still in the very early days, but fundamentally, most currencies around the world are depreciating currencies, and the Canadian dollar is no exception. The key problem with our currencies is that governments, including the Canadian government, can issue as much of the security as they deem necessary, right, to support spending, and it creates all sorts of issues with fiscal deficits, with inflation, and ultimately cash as we know it, so Canadian dollars or US dollars or really any type of cash, is not an adequate saving technology. I think we all understand that intuitively, but as you really do the research on it, you realize that you don't want to save any meaningful amounts of money in dollars. You want to invest them into appreciating assets, right? And so corporate finance as we know it, so the way in which companies keep cash on their balance sheet, in my opinion, is something that we need to revisit. And instead of having companies hold meaningful amounts of cash in dollars, there's an opportunity for us to hold part of that value in an appreciating asset like Bitcoin. And so for us, we had about $20 million of cash on our balance sheet at the time that we made the decision. I would say about half of the Goodfood board of directors personally owned Bitcoin already, which made some of the education process easier. And so we decided ultimately in January to allocate part of that $20 million into Bitcoin. And over time, we'll continue investing some of our excess cash into Bitcoin.
Interesting. Well, I'm looking forward to following that as a trend to see, how organizations protect their assets, diversify, and then, invest for growth. I will also take the opportunity to note that this podcast does not offer legal or financial advice. So, do your research, learn what
your own research. Exactly. Exactly.
Just want to highlight, you as an entrepreneur, that entrepreneurial spirit of figuring it out, making it work. I didn't mention it. You're an EY Entrepreneur of the Year. So for those of you, hopefully you're getting to understand a little bit more about Jonathan and his company, but, look into him, do some of the work. I know you've asked.
Everybody should do their own research. I totally agree with that. And, the issue when you don't do your own research is you end up buying something that you don't really know enough about to hold it. And so inevitably, when the time comes and some uncertainty happens, you don't know what you're holding and you end up losing money. So 100%, everybody needs to do their own research.
Yeah. So don't invest your life savings in a meme coin. That's all I'll say. Okay. Last question before we finish up. Genuine Tea. You recently went through an acquisition there as an organization. Canada is a finite market, but it has so much opportunity. Acquire Genuine Tea. Tell me a little bit about that. Tell us a little bit about that, a little bit about how you're supporting food entrepreneurs across the country, and then we'll say goodbye.
Absolutely. So Genuine Tea is a Canadian company headquartered in Toronto. And so I'm sure most of the audience listening from Toronto will be familiar with Genuine Tea, but the brand is present across Canada. And so the brand was founded by Sarah and Dave, two Canadian entrepreneurs. They met while doing their MBAs in Taiwan, and that's where they fell in love with direct from farm teas. They decided that there was an opportunity to bring high quality craft tea back to Canada. And they actually were the first brand to introduce authentic Japanese matcha in the Canadian market. So the brand has been known for innovation and high quality tea since it was founded. And they've positioned themselves as the barista's choice of tea. So if you go in, some of the amazing third wave coffee shops like 49th Parallel on the West Coast, or Balzac's in Toronto, the teas and the matchas and the teas that they're serving are genuine tea. So it's really been an incredible story. They actually went on Dragon's Den a few years ago. They had Arlene Dickinson as one of their investors. And, they kind of brought the business up to this point where it's been growing 30, 40% every single year. Nice, profitable business as well. But they started asking themselves the question, how do we take this to the next level, right? Like we still want to continue running the business. We're still excited about the future. But we're asking ourselves a lot of questions around the best path forward. Should we expand into the US? Should we enter different channels? How should we innovate our product offering? A lot of the things that entrepreneurs experience at different plateaus within building their business. And so the opportunity we saw was to help the Genuine Tea founders take some chips off the table, right? Some of the hard-earned cash off the table, maintain an equity stake in Genuine Tea going forward. So they are 20% equity partners in the business going forward, and continue running the business autonomously from Goodfood. So I'm the chairman of Genuine Tea. I'm active at the board level. I support the business. Of course, we find ways for Goodfood to leverage the ecosystem, right? Like use Goodfood for fulfillment, for deliveries, cross-market within the Goodfood customer base. But Sarah and Dave are continuing to run and grow their business going forward autonomously and have skin in the game going forward. And we're there as a team to help them make some of those important decisions and help them get to the next level. And so we think that there's an opportunity and a number of other genuine teas out there that exist in the Canadian market. And we're looking to meet other entrepreneurs like Sarah and Dave who want to take their business from where it is today and 10x it over time with the Goodfood team.
So I take it that folks can reach out if they have a high opportunity business that is looking for partnership, support, etc.
For sure. So I'm very active on LinkedIn. You can find me, Jonathan Ferrari, on LinkedIn. And then if you want some of the behind the scenes view of my life, on Instagram at JohnFerrari21 is where you can find me. And I'd be happy to chat with anyone on either of those platforms.
Excellent. I love it. One of the things that I find just interesting as we get into 25, 26 is, strategic acquisition, partnerships, being able to leverage other people's resources to be able to, whether that's grow or just sustain where you want to be at. I think it's going to become more and more competitive to be successful as a business, no matter where you are in the world. And so as a leader, looking at creative and new ways to be able to, maintain your cash, whether that's through a Bitcoin or other reserves, by partnership, by M&A or otherwise. So keep listening to the podcast for new and innovative ways to drive your organization forward as a leader. I'll also take the opportunity to shout out Arlene Dickinson. I'm loving what you're writing on LinkedIn. I appreciate it. I subscribe. And so thanks for doing what you do. If you ever want to come on the podcast, happy to have you. And for everybody listening, I just appreciate you being here. I hope you enjoy our conversations with amazing leaders just like Jonathan. I hope you got some 1 or 2 or 3 things that you can incorporate into your business to support growth, scale, success, and make you a better leader. So Jonathan, thanks for being here today. It's been such a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you. It's been awesome.
Folks, my name's Anthony Taylor. Thank you to my guest, Jonathan Ferrari, for sharing his story, what's next for the organization. I look forward to many great things for all of you. I appreciate you being here. Please like, subscribe, share, do all the things, and we'll see you next time. Bye, everyone.